Ever feel like your fitness tracker is kind of spying on you? I mean, it knows like how well you sleep and how much you're moving around. Heck, it might even know what you had for breakfast if you're logging every little thing. But how much control do we really have over where all that data goes?
That's the million-dollar question these days, isn't it?
Yeah.
Luckily, there's some really interesting research on this. A team led by Thing actually looked at this in 2023. They just went straight to the source and asked people, like both people who use fitness trackers and those who don't, what they really want from privacy settings.
Okay, so what did they find? Are we all just doomed to have our data floating around in the digital void?
Surprisingly, no. People actually still really care about controlling their data, even if they aren't sure how to do it. One of the biggest takeaways is that users want things to be simple. They don't want to deal with those super long privacy policies with all the legal mumbo jumbo. They just want clear and easy to use controls.
That sounds refreshing. But how simple are we talking here?
Get this. Over 70% of the people they asked wanted just one privacy setting for all of their devices. Imagine that, one and done. I know it sounds kind of extreme, but it really shows you how much people want simple privacy settings. They're tired of jumping through hoops for every little thing.
I get that, but one setting for everything, isn't that a little extreme? It seems like using a chainsaw when you need a scalpel. My privacy needs change depending on the app I'm using, don't they? For sure, and that's what makes this so interesting. Even though people want things to be simple, the study also found that they want flexibility. So they might want broader control over their data when they're comparing different brands. But once they've chosen one and started using a specific device, then they want to be able to fine-tune things.
So it's less about finding one perfect solution and more about understanding how a user's needs change, right? Like,
Uh,
what kind of control do I need at different points when I'm using a fitness tracker?
Exactly. The Thirsus research does a great job at breaking this down. So before you even buy a fitness tracker, you're probably in information gathering mode, right? You're looking at the different privacy policies and trying to figure out what each company does with your data. Yeah. It's kind of like checking the nutrition labels, but for your digital well-being.
I like that analogy. It makes reading those privacy policies feel a little less like trying to decipher another language.
Right. And then once you've picked out your tracker and you're setting it up, you're making choices about which apps can see your data and what kind of notifications you want. That's when more specific controls become really important. It's kind of like going from just browsing a menu to actually ordering food. Everyone has their own preferences.
So we've gone from wanting just one setting for everything to needing more fine-tuned options depending on where we are in our fitness tracker journey. It seems like it would be tough to balance all of that.
It's a real balancing act for sure. But Thesis team didn't just point out the problems. They had some really innovative solutions too.
Okay, I'm all ears. What can tech companies do to make privacy less of a headache? And how can we use a fitness tracker without needing a degree in data security? Let's get into it after this quick break. Don't go anywhere.
Okay, so we've talked about choosing a tracker and getting it all set up, but what happens when we're actually out there, using the thing every day? Where does privacy fit in then?
That's where things get really interesting. Our privacy needs can totally change depending on what we're doing, right? The S's research found that people really want what they call, get this, context-aware privacy settings.
Okay, context aware. It sounds kind of cool and futuristic, but what does that actually look like? Give me an example.
So say you're out for a run and you like to share your progress on one of those fitness apps.
Mhm.
In that situation, sharing your location with the app is part of the fun, right? You want people to see your route and everything. Right. Makes sense. But then I wouldn't necessarily want that same app tracking me when I'm not exercising. That's when it feels a little creepy.
Exactly, and that's the whole point of these context-aware settings.
Oh.
Instead of just having location sharing on or OF all the time, you could tell your tracker something like, okay, I only want to share my location when I'm using this specific app. Or it could even ask you each time, like, hey, you just started a workout. Is it cool if we share your location now?
So it's about giving users control over when and why they're sharing data, not just what data they're sharing. It's almost like you're having a conversation about your privacy with your device.
Totally. And it's not just about location data either. Like, think about your heart rate information. You're probably fine with your doctor having that data, but do you want, say, your insurance company to have access to it too?
Probably not. So this context idea could apply to what data is shared, who it's shared with, and even how it's used by those companies.
Yeah. And the research found that people really like this level of flexibility. It's not really about being like paranoid about privacy. It's more that they want to make their own choices that feel right to them.
It just makes sense. It's like we know we don't live in a world that's just privacy on or privacy off. Life is complicated, and our privacy settings should be complicated too.
Definitely. But there's another piece to this whole privacy thing that we don't always think about.
Oh, don't me hanging.
Updates. You know, those little messages we get on our devices that say there are new features or bug fixes.
Yeah, the ones I usually ignore. What about them?
Well, a lot of times those updates actually come with changes to the privacy settings or even how data is collected. But let's be real, how often do we really sit down and read through all that stuff?
Okay, you got me there. I'm definitely guilty of just clicking accept and hoping for the best. But it sounds like you're saying maybe I shouldn't do that.
Here's the thing. Even the updates that seem really small can change how your fitness tracker collects and uses your data. This research found that this is a major frustration for users. We just feel left in the dark, and that makes it hard to trust these companies.
Okay, I see the problem, but is there a solution? Are we doomed to just deal with these sneaky updates?
Not necessarily. What if instead of those walls of text, we got really simple summaries of what's changing and how it affects our privacy?
So basically, we need a simplified nutrition label, but for software updates. These researchers are onto something, but how would that even work in real life?
Visuals. Remember those instructions you get with IKEA furniture? Imagine if we had something like that for privacy changes.
Yeah.
Just a simple infographic that shows you exactly what's being collected, who has access to it, and how you can change your settings.
Now that's a user experience I could get behind. So instead of being scared of updates, we'd feel like we're in control of our privacy, even as our devices change.
Yeah. And what if those visuals were interactive? You could change your settings right then and there. It's about making things easy for users, make privacy less of a chore and more of just a normal part of using tech.
Okay, so we've got simple controls, context awareness, and a whole new way of doing updates. But how do we actually make this happen? How do we get companies to care about this stuff?
Well, the Sizes research actually has some answers. It all starts with changing how we think about privacy.
All right, so we're back, and we're about to explore how we can actually get tech companies to prioritize user privacy. What's this fundamental shift in thinking you were talking about?
Okay, so get this. Zeiss' research basically says that the key to making privacy user-friendly is actually pretty straightforward.
Right.
We just have to start treating it like a core part of design, not some technical thing we tack on at the end.
I hear good design all the time, but what does that even mean for something as complicated as data privacy?
Well, it's all about using some common sense stuff, things we already use in other areas of life. Like, first of all, ditch all that technical jargon. Imagine if you didn't need to be a lawyer to understand your privacy settings. What if they were just written in plain language?
I mean, there's a certain elegance in that kind of simplicity, but I can already hear those tech execs now. Oh, but we have to use all this technical wording for legal reasons.
And that's where good design comes in. Remember all those visuals we were talking about? You can use a clear, concise infographic to cut through the legal jargon and make even really complex ideas easy to understand. Plus, everyone loves a good diagram, right?
It's true, sometimes a picture really is worth 1,000 words. But let's talk about those personalized recommendations we touched on earlier. That seems like the holy grail of privacy solutions. Is that even possible?
Tase's research suggests it might be closer than we think. But companies have to move away from this idea of one-size-fits-all privacy. They need to realize that we, as users, have our own needs and worries when it comes to our data.
I mean, that just makes sense, but how do you teach a device to actually understand something as nuanced as my personal privacy preferences? Are we talking about mind-reading fitness trackers now?
Maybe not mind reading, but we are talking about using the power of AI and machine learning. Imagine a fitness tracker that learns your habits over time, like what data you're comfortable sharing in different situations, which notifications you actually want to see. It could use that information to suggest settings for you, or even adjust things automatically.
Okay, that's kind of cool, but also a little creepy. What if my fitness tracker starts judging my late-night snacking habits based on my heart rate?
That's why being transparent is super important. If AI is going to be a big part of our digital lives, we need to understand how it works, and we need to be able to change what it does. It should be about empowering users, not manipulating them, right?
So it's not just about making privacy easier, it's about building trust too. Trust that our devices are working with us, not against us. Trust that companies will be responsible with our data. And trust that we have the final say in how all of this technology actually affects our lives.
Exactly. And that's what makes this research so powerful. It's not just saying, let's tweak a few settings. It's really pushing for a completely different way of thinking about digital privacy.
A world where privacy isn't something extra you have to think about. It's just built into the way things work. I love that. Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. We've learned how to take back control of our fitness tracker data, but it feels like so much more than that. It feels like a roadmap for taking control of our digital privacy as a whole.
Absolutely. The things we've talked about today, this need for simplicity, flexibility, transparency, and trust, those are important everywhere. It's bigger than just fitness trackers. It's about building technology that respects our rights as users and helps us feel confident navigating the digital world.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of digital privacy. It's definitely complex, but it's more important than ever to stay curious and stay empowered.